All right, let's jump right in. We're about to witness a massive turning point in the story of Israel. Right here in the book of Joshua, we'll see the last epic battles of a decades-long journey finally give way to the complex and, sometimes messy business of actually settling down and claiming a home. It's a huge shift from all-out conquest to inheritance. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll kick things off with the last major conflict up in the north. Then we'll look at the official scoreboard of all the victories. After that, you'll see the story pivot from war to inheritance. We'll zoom in on the incredible story of a man named Caleb. And finally, we'll watch as the promise of land becomes a real, documented thing for the tribe of Judah. So we kick things off in chapter 11, and this feels like the final boss battle. The Israelites are fresh off their big wins in the south, but now they get word that all the northern kings have decided to team up. They formed one giant, colossal army with one single goal: to wipe Joshua and Israel off the map for good. And you've got to understand, the scale of this threat is just staggering. The Bible describes an army as numerous as the sand that is upon the seashore. And not only that, they have the high-tech weapons of the day, horses and chariots. Honestly, from a human standpoint, this looks like an absolutely impossible fight for Israel. But in the face of this terrifying army, God's message to Joshua is beautifully simple: be not afraid. And this isn't just a nice little pep talk. It's a rock-solid, concrete promise of a total victory. And he even gives a deadline: by this time tomorrow. The message couldn't be clearer. Your faith has to be bigger than what you can see. So how does it all go down? Well, Joshua's response is a masterclass in just doing what God said to do. He launches a surprise attack and gets the complete victory he was promised. But look closer at the details. He doesn't just win the battle. He follows the very specific instructions to the letter, disabling their horses and chariots and then taking down Hazor, the kingdom that was leading this whole coalition. The victory was tied directly to his precise obedience. And after this absolutely decisive campaign in the north, the chapter ends with these huge, momentous words. This is it. This signals the end of the large-scale organized resistance. The main conquest phase of Israel's mission is now, for all intents and purposes, done. Now we get to chapter 12. And look, at first glance, this can feel like a really dry list of names, but it is so much more than that. I want you to think of it as the official tally sheet. These are the receipts proving that God's promise to deliver the land has been kept, down to the very last detail. The chapter kind of breaks the whole conquest into two parts. First, it reminds everybody of the two big kings that Moses defeated on the east side of the Jordan River, before they even crossed over. And then it dives into this comprehensive list of every single king that Joshua defeated on the west side, in Canaan proper. It's the complete record. So what was the final count for Joshua's campaign? 31. That's 31 separate kingdoms, each with its own ruler, its own army, its own fortified cities, all of them conquered. That number isn't just a piece of trivia. It really drives home the unbelievable scale of what just happened. And these aren't just random names on a list. You'll see some very familiar places from earlier in our story: Jericho, Hebron, and of course Hazor, the head of that northern alliance. Every single name on this list represents a battle, a victory, and one more piece of God's promise falling into place. Okay, this is where the entire book of Joshua takes a hard right turn. In chapter 13, the whole narrative pivots. God speaks to Joshua and basically says, "You're old, the big wars are over, but there is still a whole lot of land left to be possessed." The mission is officially shifting from conquest to settlement. And right here, you see the core challenge of this new phase. Yeah, the major campaigns are done, but there are still these significant pockets of resistance left, especially along the coastal areas. The job is no longer for one unified army under Joshua. Now it's up to each individual tribe to move in and secure their own inheritance. The work is far from over. So as they start carving up the land, one tribe is set completely apart from the rest: the Levites, the priestly tribe. They don't get a piece of territory like everyone else. Why? Because their inheritance is God himself. Their role is a spiritual one, and their provision comes from the offerings the people bring to the Lord. It's this beautiful picture of their unique and vital role in Israel. So right in the middle of all these details about land and borders, chapter 14 gives us this powerful, really personal story. It's the story of Caleb, and it serves as this amazing example of what it looks like to stick with it and persevere in faith, not just for a day, but for a lifetime. I mean, let's put this into perspective. It has been 45 years since Caleb was one of the 12 spies sent into Canaan. 45 years. He and Joshua were the only two who came back and said, "We can do this." He had to endure 40 years of wandering in the desert because of everyone else's unbelief. And now, at 85 years old, he's finally here, ready to cash in on the promise God made to him all those decades ago. And his request to Joshua is just incredible. He doesn't ask for a nice, safe, easy plot of land for retirement. No, he asks for the mountain of Hebron, the exact place where the dreaded Anakim, a race of giants, still lived. He is literally asking for another fight, because he's just as confident now as he was then that God is with him. And incredibly, Joshua says yes. So Caleb's reward for a lifetime of unwavering faith isn't a peaceful retirement. It's the very challenge he was willing to take on. He receives Hebron, and we find out later that he succeeds. He drives out the giants. His faith literally became his victory. All right, our final section for today is chapter 15, which details the inheritance for the powerful tribe of Judah. Now, fair warning, this chapter has some long lists of cities and borders that might make your eyes glaze over. But stick with me, because this is the moment where a divine promise gets turned into a legal property deed. And that makes you wonder, right? Why this level of detail? Why do we need to know the names of all these obscure little villages and trace every single boundary line so carefully? Is this just ancient record keeping? No, these lists are far from boring. They are hugely significant. First off, think of it as a legal deed. This is God officially signing over the land he first promised to Abraham centuries before. It also establishes clear, God-given property lines to prevent chaos and disputes later on. And the meticulous detail? That just shows how much God cares about the specifics of his promises. And finally, it serves as a roadmap, a to-do list for the tribe of Judah. But then, the chapter ends with this really sobering and deeply important little side note. Despite all their victories, when it came to the city of Jerusalem, it says the tribe of Judah could not drive them out. This small, seemingly minor statement is a seed of incomplete obedience that is going to grow into a massive problem for Israel hundreds of years down the line. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This journey we've just seen, from total victory in the north to the inspiring faith of Caleb to the stark reality of unfinished business in Jerusalem, it shows us a really complex picture. It teaches us that God's promises are absolutely certain, but grabbing hold of them requires a persistent faith and a complete obedience, a journey that often isn't finished all at once.